Returning to the Brexit now, and there are many huge questions still to ponder. Why are Brits so disillusioned with being part of Europe, and what's going to happen next? Moments ago, I was joined by Robin Niblett, the Director of the Royal Institute of International Affairs at Chatham House in London. Robin Niblett, thank you very much for joining us on this momentous day in British history. How would you describe the shockwaves?
Large, potentially earthquake-like, certainly earthquake-like in the sense we've already lost, or at least had the announcement that the Prime Minister will step down in October. I think the shockwaves will be, more importantly, subterranean, in the sense that I think it's very unclear what the Conservative Party is going to be at the end of this. Is Conservative Party going to try to take some of the UKIP, UK Independence Party? How does it hold business together at the same time? The Labour Party, what is the Labour Party now? You've had Jeremy Corbyn, who said he was kind of 7 to 7.5 out of 10 in favour of the EU, and you've got others for whom the EU was all about the rights that people had fought for. So the political parties in the UK, I think, are in utter turmoil, as well as the UK's relations with Europe and its economy, etc.
Well, let's take the economy first. The pound has immediately fallen to its lowest level since 1985. What do you think is likely to be the impact on the British economy?
Well, it's multiple, really. The British economy is more vulnerable than it looks. It's one of these economies that seemed very strong from the outside. There's a high rate of growth, but the budget deficit is high. It's around 3–4% last year. We're running a current account deficit of about 5% of GDP. So the British economy, untethered from Europe, is vulnerable. That means the pound may not bounce back up again quite as quickly. I mean, I'm playing guesswork a little bit here on that side of things, but inflation could go up, and Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, is going to find himself in this difficult position between not wanting to raise interest rates so as to manage any inflationary pickup that might happen. At the same time, he can't drop them much more to be able to keep the economy ticking over at the same time. So I think the economic challenges are going to be in the near term quite sharp for about a year. Then, to be honest, it might be less than that. I think things will settle for a while.
How about the ripple effect through Europe politically? I heard Geert Wilders interviewed earlier, and he was saying, oh, well, the Brits have had their turn. Our country needs its turn now. Would you expect there to be any sort of general political ripple through the EU?
I think people will look and see how the UK does outside the EU. But look, never mind a ripple. There's going to be, again, like a tsunami wave heading over across Europe. You've got Spanish elections on the 26th, the day after tomorrow, French elections next year, German elections coming up. This is a particular turbulent moment for Britain to take the step that it's taken. So I think the ripple effects would be a strengthening of the message of the populist parties, who are either sceptical in terms of leaving, like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, or just those who want to leave the euro or who want to see more control come back home. But I also think that there'll be like a demonstration effect. And I think a lot of the political parties are going to try to find ways to hang together and come together and avoid having what happened to the UK happen to them as well. So in a way, it could have a slight inoculation effect, actually, against this actually having a contagion effect.
This result was somewhat of a shock. People thought that Britain would remain. I know this is a very broad question, but I mean, why? What is the reason behind this?
There are many reasons. I've said to people, this is a Trumpy world. We're in a world where Jeremy Corbyn, no one thought he'd be elected leader of the Labour Party. No one thought Donald Trump would be the Republican presidential candidate. People in developed countries, in particular in the West, many of them feel that globalization is not working for them, and that governments have lost control over their economic and social destinies. And they are looking, to use the phrase of the Leave campaign, to take back control. And any government that offers simple answers, populist answers, in my opinion, of the sort that we use for the Leave campaign, have a much stronger chance of getting through now than they would have done even 5 or 10 years ago. The global financial crisis has not led to a pickup in people's sense of welfare in general in the West. So this is really a protest vote, in my opinion. It was anti-EU for many of the people leading the campaign in the UK. But those who voted to leave the UK have voted just against the establishment, against their state of life. And I've spoken to enough people who are voting leave for whom the EU is really not the issue. You'd say, well, hold on, that's not the EU that did that, or that's not the EU that does that. And they go, oh, that's not the point. You know, I'm voting out because I want out of my situation more than out of the EU.
Briefly, what happens next now?
Well, the problem is that the leavers don't have a plan. I mean, different leavers have different plans, but they're going to have to somehow cobble together a large number of their voters who are voting anti-immigration and for a more protected world versus those leavers who said, no, this is a chance for Britain to be a proud trading nation again, get rid of regulation, open up the borders, you know, it's rule Britannia, buccaneering across the Atlantic. So you've got very different instincts amongst those who've backed the Leave campaign, and bringing them together. It is not the Conservative Party, in a way, that has the mandate. Remember, you've got 2/3 at least, maybe 3/4 of British MPs who wanted Britain to remain. So what's going to happen in the near term, I think, is David Cameron has bought time by saying he will not step down till October. During that time, the government will try not to implement Article 50, which sets a sort of 2-year ticking clock, in which then, in a way, the UK has to take whatever is on the menu from the other 27 member states and try to use this in-between period to kind of pre-cook a deal, using the fact that the rest of the EU will be worried about contagion. They won't want the British departure to affect their economies. So what's going to come next, in a way, is Britain trying to stay in the single market of the EU while no longer having to take immigration from the rest of the EU and not paying into the budget, which, of course, is a perfect world that they won't fully get.
Well, the rest of us around the world are watching with great interest. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.